What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I'm here to make my post-game analysis video for you for the victory over the Philadelphia Eagles yesterday. The Miami Dolphins versus Philadelphia Eagles. This is a Victory Monday, which is awesome. I do apologize for the video being kind of late. I had a bunch of things I had to do earlier today, and also I told you guys, or I've been saying that, mostly in my live streams. I don't remember if I mentioned this in a video, but I've decided to make my post-game videos on Mondays, because that's like, Mondays are my days off that I've decided to take off to have a little rest and to do other things, errands and other stuff. And then also it gives me an opportunity to really, delve in, take good notes and so on and so forth. So I'm actually going to be doing things a little bit differently with the structure of my videos, and that's part of the reason why it took me so long to get this made. So I hope you guys do like how I'm doing my videos now. I'm trying to make them a little bit more clear, a little bit more concise and shorter. So hopefully that works out, and hopefully you guys like it. So let's get right into it. So first and foremost, obviously, like I said, it was a win. It was a beautiful game. And look, I consider myself to be the most objective out of all of the content creators and so on and so forth. I consider myself to be the one that uses full context, make sure I don't leave anything out, right? And, I'm definitely able and willing to admit I'm wrong and so on and so forth. So look, in this one, there's going to be some firsts, and I'm going to give the coaching staff a ton of credit because they deserve it in this one. And, I've given them credit before. Like, I thought, signing Xavier Howard to a contract extension was great, even though they did design his contract in such a way that they paid him all of his money, his guaranteed money already, and they could easily trade him. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully he does remain a Dolphin at this point. But it is still a thing that could happen, right? So, based off of the contract. Now, I think it's unlikely, but it's part of it, right? It's just part of the overall context. That's how they designed his contract. But I gave him credit for that, right? But same thing with like Jakeem Grant. They have an out next year. I gave him credit for signing him to a long-term extension because I thought, in the return game and in the offense, he could be very useful, so on and so forth. But they did structure his contract where they could just cut him next year and have no ramifications. So, and, one of the problems that I do have with this regime still, and look, I'm even willing to give them some credit and change my position a little bit and say that, these players, I definitely think the majority of their motivation is their own contracts, their own careers, and their own pride and stuff like that. However, I'd be willing to concede a little bit that, Brian Flores has done some good things, culturally speaking. I think he's also done some things negatively speaking as far as the culture, but he has done some things that I think the guys do like, and I can understand that. Okay, so he gets some credit for that. Also, but it's not just him though. Of course, it's also the rest of the coaching staff, which I had initially given him credit for, saying that he did pick a bunch of guys that were had good pedigrees and so on and so forth. So there's going to be some credit in this. So it's going to be, a little bit different, right? Because they earned it. There were definitely still some bad things, and I'm going to give it all to you because, like I said, I do consider myself to be the most objective, the one that gives you the fullest context. So, and I take pride in that, right? So anything that I put my name on, I take pride in, and I try and do a good job, and I'm trying to improve that for you as I go along. So, let's get into this. Starting off with the injury report, of course, the Dolphins will have wide receivers Albert Wilson and Allen Hurns in the lineup when they face the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday. Both players were full participants in practice Friday after being limited the previous 2 days, and neither had a game status designation on the final injury report of the week. And, of course, they both did play. The Dolphins listed 4 players as questionable for the game against the Eagles, all of them defensive backs, which is, obviously wasn't good because our defense, particularly in the backfield of the defense, have been, definitely decimated by injuries. But it is what it is, right? So 4 cornerbacks: Ken Crawley with a shoulder, Ryan Lewis chest, and Ken Webster with an ankle, along with safety Stephen Parker with a groin. Lewis and Webster were full participants in practice Friday, while Crawley and Parker were limited. Let's see. The other 6 players who are on the injury report this week will be available: linebacker Jerome Baker, running back Kalen Ballage, defensive end Taco Charlton, quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick, Hearns, and Wilson. Okay, and so for the Philadelphia Eagles, they listed 2 players as questionable Friday, one of them being starting tight end Zach Ertz. He was limited in practice Friday with a hamstring. He did play, although it's notable that Ertz had a couple really big drops in this game that were pretty important, that definitely hampered the Eagles, but we'll get into that a little bit more as the analysis goes on. Also listed as questionable was running back Jordan Howard, who missed the Eagles game against the Seattle Seahawks last Sunday because of a shoulder injury. And then real quick for the inactives, for us, Miami's inactive lists included Stephen Parker, safety Stephen Parker, cornerback Ken Crawley, defensive tackle Gerald Willis, center guard Chris Reed, tackle Isaiah Prince, center guard Keaton Sutherland, and linebacker Trent Harris. So those are the injuries. Those are the guys that were inactive. And so, look, this game, there was a lot of fun. There was a lot of good. There was a lot of up and down, right? But the guys fought, and the coaching staff did definitely coach a good game overall. There was a lot of good aggressive in this game. We came away with the win, which is awesome. We will talk about draft positioning at the end of this. But there was definitely a lot of good. But, like the offensive line, like the entire team played well overall, for sure. They fought hard. There was, good coaching along the way. Good moments of aggressiveness, some bad moments as well, but ultimately came away with, the W. And there was, some wonderful, beautiful moments, but then there were also some pretty terrible moments, like, in like pass protection, right? So there were some moments where Fitzpatrick had some, great time, and there were moments where he didn't, right? And then our run game was still pretty terrible, right? So there's definitely still a lot to improve on. But we got the win, and that's the most important thing. And for me, again, there was the 4 things that I'm looking at. Did we win? How competitive were we? What was the status of our injuries? And bright spots, right? So I'm going to talk about all of that, but let me real quick go through the actual stats for this game. So Dolphins are now 3-9, and the Philadelphia Eagles dropped to 5-7. We beat them 37-31. We had 409 total yards of offense, which was awesome. By the way, I was wrong. I thought, the offense was going to struggle. I thought we might have a step back against a solid defense. But to be fair, in full context, their defense definitely did get worn down for sure, by the heat. They were obviously sitting in the sun. It was over 80 degrees. So that had some effect. Did it, decide the game? No, of course not. But that it's full, like I said, full context. So that's part of it. The Eagles did shoot themselves in the foot quite a bit. Anyway, so like I said, I'll get into the analysis in a minute. Let me go ahead and just get through this. They had 386 total yards. We had 351 passing yards. They had 294. We had only 58 rushing yards. So our rush offense obviously wasn't that great. But our rush defense definitely took a step up. We only allowed 92. I mean, we're still giving up over 100 on average, which is not great, but that obviously does help and helped us win this game. We also had 6.5 yards per play, which definitely helps. They had 5.8, so not great. We still want to be able to hold them to 4 or whatever, but okay. We came away with the win, so whatever. No fumbles. No lost fumbles anyway, and each team threw 1 interception, so we were tied in turnover differential, right? It was just a wash there, right? We're even 1-1. We were 41% on third downs. They were 50%. So they were a little bit better, but still 40% is good. And if we could be consistently at 40%, then that's wonderful, right? Obviously certainly want it to be even a little bit higher than that. I mean, you would like it to ideally be over 50%, but right now, I mean, getting to 40% consistently would be fabulous for this team and for this offense. We had the ball for 31 minutes and 18 seconds. They had it for 28-42, so obviously we had a advantage there in the time of possession. We had 7 penalties. They had 10. Still too many, and that was only accepted. So there were some other ones as well. So the trend of us having, you know, our penalties, we're trending in the wrong direction there for another consecutive game. But it is what it is. You know, penalties in this one didn't really, you know, decide the game either. There was some bad officiating, some bad calls, but I'm not really going to go into that too much because it didn't really affect the outcome of the game. Really, and they had 10 penalties as well. So, but that goes to show that, you know, part of the context is, you know, some bad officiating. They definitely shot themselves in the foot quite a bit. I mean, they had 10 penalties, so they did have, you know, a few more than us. You know, so like I said, part of the context. Ryan Fitzpatrick was 27 for 39, 69.2% completion percentage for 365 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a 113.7 passer rating. Matt Hawk had a touchdown, or had a pass attempt, was completed, so he's 100%. 1 yard, 1 touchdown, and a 158.3 passer rating. So I put the passer. I don't know if I don't know if that actually translates. I'm pretty sure it does to a perfect passer rating. I put that in there just to be fun. But we'll get into that and why he actually had a touchdown pass. Because I'm sure if you didn't see the game, you'd be wondering, why does Matt Hawk, our punter, have a touchdown pass? But we'll get into that, and that's part of what made this game, you know, really fun to watch. Certainly the best game that we've had all season, and part of why the coaching staff definitely deserves credit. Carson Wentz was 28 of 46, 60.9% completion percentage, 310 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a 93.6 passer rating. Albert Wilson led the way for us in rushing, 2 rushes, 31 yards, and a 15.5 average. Myles Gaskin had 2 rushes for 20 yards and a 10 average. Patrick Laird had 10 rushes, 5 yards, a 1 touchdown, and a .5 average. So he did get stuffed quite a bit on his rushing attempts today, but he definitely did contribute in the passing game. And this is, so far in his entire body of work, that's kind of the outlier, because he has been our most productive back on the ground really to this point. So, you know, I don't put too much onto him yet. I mean, in that regard for this game, we'll see how he continues forward and if he continues to, you know, produce going forward. So I won't judge him too harshly for not doing so well on the run game, especially considering the fact that this offensive line is pretty terrible. Miles Sanders led the way for them, 17 rushes, 83 yards, and a 4.9 average. And then Jay Ajayi had like 9 yards, but he's definitely not nearly as explosive and stuff as he used to be, you can tell. Devontae Parker led the way for us, and he was definitely one of the bright spots in this game. We'll get to that in a bit, but let me just give you his stats for now. 7 out of 10 for 159 yards and 2 scores. Mike Gesicki was 5 of 7, 79 yards and a touchdown. Got his second NFL touchdown, 2 in a row. Right? 1 this game, 1 last game, so good for the kid. Patrick Laird was 4 of 5, 43 yards. Alan Hearns, 3 of 4, 33. Albert Wilson, 5 of 5, 32 yards. Durham Smythe, 2 for 3, 13 yards. Alshon Jeffrey led the way for them, 9 out of 16, 137 yards and a touchdown. Dallas Goedert was 6 of 7, 66 yards. Nelson Aguilar, 3 of 6, 41 yards. Zach Ertz, 3 of 6, 24 yards. Miles Sanders, 5 of 5, 22 yards and a touchdown. And JJ Arcega-Whiteside, 1 out of 2, 15 yards and a score. Ryan Fitzpatrick did have a fumble, but it was recovered by us. Carson Wentz had a fumble, but it was recovered by them. Defensively, Ken Webster led the way for us, 7 solo tackles. Adrian Colbert, whatever, had 4 solo tackles. Sam McGuavin had 4 solo, 1 sack, and 3 tackles for tackle for losses. Raekwon McMillan had 3 solo, 4 assisted tackles. Eric Rowe, 3 solo, 2 assisted with a pass defense. Jamal Wiltz, 3 solo tackles. Nick Needham, 2 solo, 2 assisted with a pass defense. Taco Charlton, 2 solo, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble. Christian Wilkins, 2 assisted tackles with a pass defense. Chris Lamons had an interception and a pass defense. Let's note, though, that Chris Lamons interception It was lucky. It was a Hail Mary play on the last play of the game, or one of the last plays of the game. It could have easily just been a deflected, incomplete pass. It also could have, been a completion for the Eagles and a touchdown. But that's as likely as an interception. More often than not, it ends up being an incomplete pass in those situations. But good for him, and it was his first career interception. But just like I said, full context. He also had a pass defense. Walt Aikens also threw in a pass defense. Malcolm Jenkins led the way for them, 7 solo tackles and a pass defense. Derek Barnett had 6 solo tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. Jalen Mills, 3 solo tackles, 1 assisted, 2 passes defense. Ronald Darby, 3 solo tackles, 1 interception for 16 yards and a pass defense. Camus Kruger Hill had 3 solo tackles. Nigel Bradham, 2 solo, 2 assisted, and a pass defense. Timmy Jernigan, 2 solo, 1 assisted, a tackle for loss. Anthony Rush, 2 solo, 1 tackle for loss and a pass defense. Vinny Curry, 1 solo, 1 assisted, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss. Fletcher Cox, 1 solo, 1 assisted, a half sack, and a tackle for loss. Brandon Graham, 1 solo, 1 assisted, and a tackle for loss. And Josh Sweat, 1 assisted tackle and a half sack. In the kicking game, Jason Sanders was 1 for 1 on his field goal, and it was for 51 yards. Which was a big field goal late in the game that helped us extend our lead at that point. But he was 2 for 3 on his extra points. He did miss one. But we'll talk about that. Jake Elliott was 3 of 4 on his field goals with a long of 48 and 2 of 2 on his extra points. Matt Hawk had 3 punts with a 32 average, so not great there. He kind of had a down day in that way, but he had a standout day in another way, which we'll talk about in a minute. None inside the 20 and long of 41. Cameron Johnston had 3 punts with a 42.7 average, 2 inside the 20 and a long of 46. Kickoff return, Durham Smythe had 1 return for 6 yards. They didn't have any. Marcus Sherrills had 2 returns for no yards. And, and that was in punt return. Punt return, Marcus Sherrills had 2 returns for no yards, and they didn't have any punt returns at all. So, those are the stats for the game. I've given you, the injury report and the inactives. So now let me get into the key points and the analysis and so on and so forth, right? So for me, at the midway point of the season, I said, the 4 things that I'm really caring about are, did we win? Were we competitive? What's our injury status? And the bright spots, right? So number 1, did we win? Abso-fucking-lutely. So that's wonderful, right? So it was definitely unexpected. I did think that this game actually could have potentially turned into, a little bit like we saw last week against the Browns. I thought the Eagles definitely had potential to, and they started the game off pretty hot, right? But momentum definitely shifted quick. This team, including the coaching staff, certainly fought, did a lot of things great. And, we came through it, and it ended up being, a bit of a shootout, which was awesome. There was a lot of fun in this game. So that was great, right? Were we competitive? Absolutely, right? It didn't seem like it off the rip. It looked like it was going to be another down day, right? Ryan Fitzpatrick started the game. We got the ball to start the game. Ryan Fitzpatrick started with an interception on the first play. First play of the game, Ryan Fitzpatrick throws a pick, right? Then the Eagles, obviously, they have short field position, and they get an easy touchdown. Montre Hardage, who just got brought up to the 53-man roster, had a missed assignment and allowed a really easy touchdown. They did move on our defense pretty easily on their first few drives especially, and definitely were able to move the ball on us pretty consistently over, the course of the day. So, there definitely needs to be, we need to tighten up on the defense. We need to get better communication, so on and so forth. Obviously, a lot of that is the byproduct of young, inexperienced, so on and so forth. But full context and to be completely fair and stuff, the coaching staff and front office does have culpability in that. The Eagles defense got 3 sacks early. They also had... but the Eagles, like I said, also had a bunch of mistakes throughout the game. Penalties, drop passes, bad throws. But at the very beginning, it looked like the Eagles were going to start, getting away with this game, right? They got up 10-0. Things were going well, and then things started to shift. And then it didn't completely shift to us, but it definitely balanced out, and we were able to, get enough momentum in our direction and enough, positive things together that we came away with the win. Right, the first few drives for the Dolphins were shut down. I mean, the first one was an interception. The next couple were 3 and outs with some sacks thrown in there. Dolphins coaching staff did continue their trend of using Ballage until he got hurt. He did get hurt early in the game, and it's a leg injury. I'll note that a little bit more in the injuries, but. So, the coaching staff might have lucked out a little bit here. I mean, at this point, we can't say if they would have continued to stay with Ballage, right? So, again, I'm going to definitely give this coaching staff a lot of credit. In this game, there were still some bad decisions, but they kind of get like a pass and a bye on this one, right? Because Ballage ended up getting hurt, and then they kind of had to use Laird and Gaskin a bit more, right? And they did show early on that they were going to stubbornly use Ballage. So we'll kind of never know on that one. And that actually, but it is significant because it could have changed the dynamic of the game. If they would have continued to push Ballage instead of using Laird and Gaskin, then it would have taken away from some of our production, could have stalled some drives, and made things certainly more difficult on us. But, they certainly then drew up some good plays for Laird and Gaskin because they, then got on the field. They got some touches. Laird got some catches as well, and they proved to be, a good pairing back there. And I think that, certainly they are bright spots and they could potentially be. I mean, Gaskin has been inactive for most of the season and hasn't done much up until this point, but he was a little bit more effective in this game. And I think that there is certainly potential with Laird and Gaskin as, part of a stable, right? Because I'm more of a proponent for a stable of backs. I like having 2 or 3 guys that you can have as interchangeable guys. And also, too, though, Chandler Cox was used in this game, which that's another thing I forgot to mention about, the misuse of personnel. Where's Chandler Cox been, right? But there's been so many things to negatively give the coaching staff credit for. I kind of forgot about it, but it's true. Where's he been, right? And I mean, he's been active, so why haven't they been using him? But then they used him in this game, and it proved to be effective in some areas, right? And but we'll get into that a little bit more as well. So like I said, there were a bunch of penalties in this game, so that was kind of not good, not a good trend there, but it didn't really matter overall. The Dolphins offense definitely did come to life, like I said. The offensive line played well overall. They had a really rough start, and they had ebbs and flows throughout the game, right? Which I will, give some more details to in a minute. The team played solid complementary football overall, and that definitely helped to contribute to the win. The defense was a bit up and down, but played well overall as well and held their own. Like I said, I mean, they had some missed assignments and some bad plays. They had some penalties, some costly ones, but then they had some really good plays as well. The players definitely continue to show the grit and fight that they've shown all season. And like I said, the coaching staff deserves a ton of credit in this one. So, but it is also a mixed bag. But this is the first time that in a single game, the coaching staff did a lot more right than they did wrong. And they showed, more examples of like positive aggressiveness, even though some of it was, super risky, it worked out for them and so on and so forth. So they do kind of get a little bit of a pass there because some of the stuff was super risky and kind of, even might say a little bit unnecessary. So like I said, it's a mixed bag, but it's definitely more positive credit. So let's get into some examples, right? So the Dolphins, early in the game, right, in the first quarter, right, Dolphins are on the Eagles 43. It's 4th and 4, 3:23 in the first quarter, and we're down 17-0, right? So 4th and 4, they draw up a deep shot to Parker, right down the left sideline. Now, Parker mosses the defender and keeps his balance, right? And he ends up like skirting the sideline and running it in for a score, right? So the play ended up working. It was aggressive and it ended up being a success, right? But the play was massively risky and it depended on a lot of things to go right. So, right, because especially at that point in the game, right, that you're down 10-0, it's 4th down, you got 4 yards to go. That's tough. I mean, you haven't been particularly good in almost any way on offense. You'd already given up a few sacks, you know, so, and it's a deep shot, so you need time to drop back. You need, and honestly, there was good coverage, right? Like I said, Parker mossed the guy, right? So it was, you have to trust that Fitzpatrick's not going to have one of his shitty throws and he's going to have one of his good throws and put it right on the spot, which he did, so credit to him. And you have to trust that Parker's going to do what he's, you know, what was brought here to do, right? And what his potential dictates that he should be able to do. And he did, so credit to him, right? And this is an example where their aggressiveness paid off, right? But it certainly was massively risky, right? Up to that point, the protection was shoddy at best, but they did hold up. Fitz and Parker chemistry is definitely there. They have a thing. But at the same time, when Parker is doing what he's supposed to do and living up to his potential, right? Because he's supposed to be known for, you know, those jump balls, 50-50 balls. So when he does that, he does give, you know, like almost any quarterback the opportunity to have success with those kinds of passes, right? So you can kind of just chuck it up there and he'll go get it. That's what he's supposed to do. And now that he's actually healthy, you know, he's and you know, confident, he's showing it. He's always shown the flashes, but now he's having an opportunity to show it consistently. And he definitely dominated in this game for like really the first time in his career. But yeah, so he does definitely give you, and same thing with Mike Gesicki, and those were Ryan Fitzpatrick's 2 top targets. So that is notable, right? You can just throw it up to them and they'll go and get it. But to their credit, they did that today. Next is Dolphins were in the red zone on the Eagles 10. It was 3rd and goal, 6 minutes and 4 seconds to go in the first half, down 13-7, right? There was a back shoulder throw to Parker and the call on the field was incomplete. Now, there was a possible penalty, like the commentary was talking about it. Real quick, before I say that, I wanted to mention one other thing that the commentary said about the previous what I was talking about Parker, right? They did mention how, you know, Parker is that kind of guy where, or they said that, you know, Parker is just, because he did it all day. He did it all day. He went up and high pointed the ball, and that's what he's, you know, here for. That's what a number 1 receiver does, right? But he did it all day. So Ryan Fitzpatrick didn't have to be super accurate, right? Anyway, so the call on the field was incomplete. There was a possible pass interference call. It was borderline. The call on the field was incomplete. They did talk about it because they were showing replays. Parker got up. He was frustrated. He was like, come on, blah, blah, blah. It was a back shoulder throw. The pass could have been more accurate, but when you watch the replay in real time, it didn't really look like it. It looked really super borderline, looked like a good no call. On the replay though, you know, Parker did have to kind of lay out for it, so that might have had something to do with it a little bit. But the defensive back did get his arm kind of around Parker's neck, and there was a bit of a, like a, you know, a hindrance there. And he definitely was hindered from being able to, you know, make the catch. His ability to catch the ball was disrupted. Like I said, it could be in part because Fitzpatrick wasn't exactly accurate and wasn't exactly, didn't put the ball exactly where it needed to be, and thus Parker had to kind of lay out for it to get it. But regardless, based off of the rule, it definitely was a pass interference. So this is another instance in which I'm going to give the coaching staff, specifically Brian Flores, credit. He challenged it, right? He threw the challenge flag, and it was a success because, again, on the review, they determined that based off of the rules, it was a pass interference, and I agreed with that, right? And so credit to him. On the very next set of downs, the Dolphins were on the Eagles' 1-yard line. It was 4th and goal with 4 minutes and 44 seconds left to go in the first half, down 13-7, right? So, after that penalty, we got a fresh set of downs. Ryan Fitzpatrick had gotten sacked. We went through, the first 3 downs. We were unable to, get anything. We weren't able to get a score and get it into the end zone, right? And it was 4th down, 4th and goal. They decided to be aggressive again. Now, it was a trick play, right? There's a lot of talk about it. If you guys saw it, it was amazing. So tons of credit again to this coaching staff. They lined up basically in a punt formation. Matt Hawk, and this is back to, if you're wondering how did Matt Hawk get a touchdown, well, this is where it happened. He lined up, right? It's technically a punt formation, but he lined up, in the gun. He was, a few yards back from the center, and it was a direct snap to him. Now, he faked like he was going to run for it, right? Jason Sanders was on the line. He faked like he was going to block for Matt Hawk. Matt Hawk just flips the ball into the end zone. Jason Sanders is there. He goes down on one knee. It's so funny too, because I don't know if he felt confident enough in his own fucking catching abilities to just like two-hand it, because he dropped down to one knee. But regardless, he made the catch, and it was a touchdown, which gave us a 14-13 lead. It was a little shovel pass. It was beautiful. It was brilliant. It was amazing. And the first touchdown pass, the commentary mentioned, it was the first touchdown pass from a punter to a kicker in the Super Bowl era. It was brilliant. It was sexy. It was sexy. That's what I kept saying in the live stream. It was sexy. It was sexy. It was great. It was absolutely wonderful, right? So again, tons of credit to this coaching staff. But again, there was also some bad, right? Some bad decisions. And, in the case of Kalen Ballage, we don't know. I mean, they could have continued to push it. We just won't know. And frankly, at this point, he might end up being out for the season. So we might not ever get to see if they continue to try and push with him. So they kind of get skate free a little bit on that one. But so let's get on, let's get into some, continue with some of these examples, because there were some bad ones, which I'm about to tell you about right now. And then there were some more good ones. So on the other hand, coming out in the second half, right, we kicked the ball to the Philadelphia Eagles. They got it to start the second half. They tried to be aggressive again. This was an example though of unnecessarily aggressive, right? So, at that point, though, we were down 21-14, right? Because the Eagles did score another touchdown before the half. So, they brought it from, and then they got a successful 2-point conversion as well, which brought them up to 21. So 21-14, we come out, and they tried to be aggressive and to do an onside kick. Now, but to be fair, we did, we have converted a good amount of them this season. So to be fair to them, but it was unnecessary, right? You're down 21-14. It's only a 1-score game. And if you fuck this up, you're going to give them great field position, and they fucked it up, right? And so, why take that risk? It's just unnecessary, right? It's I mean, I don't know, maybe he let his ego run away with him or whatever, and whatever, but it was just totally unnecessary. And then they end up moving downfield pretty handily to get another touchdown to move them up 28-14. So even after, the awesome stuff at the end of the first half and the scrappiness, we got it back, or we took the lead 14-13. Yes, then we let up a touchdown, and, for all intents and purposes going into the half, we expected them to, for sure get the ball coming out, because, none of the fans knew they were going to try an onside kick. Right, so it didn't make sense. So it was overly aggressive, and it did fail. But also, on the season, still to this point, most of their decisions have been failures. And here's the thing, though. It's not just that they've been failures. It's also that they've been big failures, massive failures, but also because a lot of it's just highly questionable. The most notable, of course, was the 3rd and 20 play against the Steelers, especially considering earlier in that game, and then I think it was this game, there was there have been instances prior to that play and after the play in which the Dolphins defense was set up with a 3rd and long against the opposing team's offense, and they played prevent defense. So they know what they understand, the concepts, and understand that's how you do it, and so on and so forth. And they understand the massive risk that goes with it, and they did it anyway, right? So there are still to this point more examples, quite a few more examples of aggressive attempts that were just massive failures, and certainly a few examples. I consider the 2-point conversion against the Washington Redskins when we had an opportunity to come back, and that's actually huge too, because the Redskins right now are ahead of us in the pick order, even though they also won their game yesterday. So that actually could hamper our draft positioning quite a bit. So there are plenty of examples of them, massively fucking up calls, timeouts, and challenges as well. But in this game, there was the good outweighed the bad. But let's continue, right? So there was an example of not too long after that, right? The Dolphins, so it's 28-14. The Dolphins end up, getting the ball back. They get a score, and they bring it to 28-20, right? There was a missed extra point by Jason Sanders, so that prevented us from moving it to 21. And there was also a missed field goal attempt by the Eagles that prevented them from bringing their score to 31, right? So at this point, it's 28-20. The Dolphins move down the field again. They get another touchdown, right? And so now they're down 28-26, and they go for 2 points. Okay, so I get it. You want to be aggressive, right, to tie the game. You want to try and get that 2. There was 1:10 left in the 3rd quarter. It was like I said, it was after the missed extra point and the missed field goal from the Eagles. So that's what brought us to 28-20. The offensive line, though, on this play, right, on this 2-down conversion, got blown up, and Fitzpatrick was officially sacked, right? Davenport, the left tackle, was bulldozed right into Fitzpatrick, and the attempt failed. Now, why do I bring this up, right? So I don't necessarily disagree with it in like the spirit of it, right? So like I get it, you want to try and go for the 2, you're mounting a comeback, you want to try and tie the game. But the reason why I bring it up is because really for the Redskins game, right? And for the example of the Redskins game. Now there's a difference. In that game, with the Redskins game, the odds actually, especially based off of how that game played, right? Defensive heavy, low scoring. Your offense came to life under Ryan Fitzpatrick. You actually stood a better chance of winning the game if you would have taken it to overtime. And then on top of that, again, there were only 2 blockers for 4 defenders. Kenyon Drake dropped the pass, but even if he didn't, it would have been blown up anyway. And then the other thing is Mark Walton was the one that practiced it, and their defense for that play was, well, we practiced it all week, but then they used in that crunch time, in that moment to win the game, right? They decided to be aggressive, but then they used the most important person on the play. I mean, even if Mark Walton, to be fair to them, Mark Walton would have gotten blown up anyway, but you should still use the guy that you practiced with. So everything about that play, absolutely everything about that play was massively questionable from the start, right? From the deciding to go for it when you probably would have had better odds in overtime, and everything down to the play design, to the personnel used, so on and so forth, right? But in this case, and especially because the offensive line is bad and so on and so forth, right? But in this case, it makes more sense. It was definitely smarter in this case to go for it, but it was still pretty risky, because especially considering the fact that your offensive line is terrible, and and in this case, Davenport got bulldozed right into Ryan Fitzpatrick, and so it ended up being inconsequential overall, and it was a failed attempt, but it was an all right one. It was a good way to be aggressive, and I don't dislike it, even though it failed, right? But later on, I did bring it up in part though to juxtapose it to the one in the Redskins game, to show how just absolutely foolish it was in that game, and why that's definitely significant evidence, along with other stuff like the 3rd and 20 play against the Steelers, that show that the coaching staff has done and made decisions specifically to put us in bad positioning to be successful. But later on in this game, they had another 2-point conversion attempt, right? At this point though, we were up 32-28 to extend the lead to 6 instead of 5, right? It was 11 minutes and 6 seconds left in the game. It was a beautiful throw and catch from Fitzpatrick to Laird, and it was a success, right? So it was another good example of being aggressive, right? I mean, in this case, you could say, okay, we'll just take the extra point, and especially since, there's questions about your offensive line, it certainly would have been safer, but at that point, I mean, you were up already by 4 points. They would have had to have gotten a touchdown. A field goal wouldn't have mattered. You were deep. It was a 2-point conversion, so if it failed, I mean, they would be deep in their own territory. Your defense had been playing solid, so it was actually, a smart aggressive, right? Both of the 2-point conversion attempts, I thought, were smart in those moments, for the overall context, the position they were at in the game, the circumstances, and so on and so forth, where I don't agree with that at all if you wanted to put that on the Redskins game, even though the first one failed and the second one was a success. And then finally, like I said, the vast majority of this is credit to the coaching staff. The one thing really is the knocks on this is the onside kick to start the second half. I just thought that was absolutely foolish and totally stupid, way too over aggressive. So that one's just a negative, definitely negative points there. And then some of it was, a bit too risky for my liking, especially considering the makeup of this team and so on and so forth right now. I mean, later down the road, if we had a better offensive line and a run game, some of that stuff, and more proven ability to convert things, then, I might say yes, but at this particular point, some of it was a little bit too risky. But that's the worst. The one play, and some of it was a little bit too, a little bit riskier than what I would have gone. Right? But finally, there is one more example. The Dolphins were on the Eagles' 38.5 line. It was 2nd and 1, up 34-28 at this point. 6 minutes and 12 seconds left in the game. Quarterback sneak that gets stuffed, causing a 3rd and 1. So part of the reason why I actually bring this up is to juxtapose it to one of the 4th down calls. I can't remember specifically what game it was. It was a game or two ago. It was a 4th down call though, at the goal line. It was a yard or two away from, I think it was a yard away from the goal line in a game recently. And it was an example of an aggressive attempt that I didn't like. Right? And because Ryan Fitzpatrick's not really known for quarterback sneaks, and the offensive line is terrible, and so on and so forth. So I didn't like it, right? And so, and the same thing cropped up here, right? It was a quarterback sneak, and it was on 2nd and 1. In this case, I didn't hate it as much, just simply because of the fact that it it wasn't going to cause a turnover. It was only 2nd down. So on 3rd down, obviously, that's why I said circumstance and context is super important, right? But it did end up failing, right? And then on 3rd down was a drop pass by Clive Walford, and it ended up being 4th down, right? Now, I certainly, wouldn't have gone with the quarterback sneak on 2nd and 1, but I didn't hate it. I just, but it proves why that fourth and 1 in the previous game was a bad call and a not a smart decision. But then in that very same drive on 4th down, they did go for it. Again, aggressive. So again, in this game, far more smart aggressiveness than there was, disastrous and stupid aggressive, confusing aggressive, and so on and so forth. Also, too, look, man, when in those moments where Brian Flores in the previous games was like throwing tantrums on the side of the field, there was no point, right? Because he was just, there was no reason for it. But in this game, look, again, just so much credit. They get it. They get it because they deserved it, right? And he was, he was going hard. They were all going hard, right? Anyway, so on 4th down, it was a quick slant to Parker that picks up the 1st down and then resulted in a field goal that extended our lead to 9 points, making it 37-28 at that point in the game. And it was great because Parker, like I said, he was dominating in this game for sure. He got up flexing after that. It was wonderful. It was good to see. Like I said, man, I loved Devontae Parker coming out. He was the guy that I wanted in that draft first overall, and I was so excited to get him. I have his jersey. It's part of the reason why I decided to wear his jersey for this video because he had such an amazing game. And it was wonderful to see, right? And he definitely is, on pace to have a breakout season. I mean, it already is. He's definitely on pace to break 1,000 yards. Right now, he's at 53 receptions, 854 yards, 6 touchdowns, right? He was talking shit all day. He was making 50-50 grabs all day. He truly dominated in this game for the first time really in his entire career. But we have to be fair and give full context, right? So he wasn't a pick of Brian Flores. He wasn't a pick of Adam Gase either, right? He came in the 2015 draft, so before that. So technically, I suppose that was Philbin it would be Philbin because he was fired halfway through the year, and then oh man, I can't remember our interim head coach. I'm blanking on his name right now. The tight ends coach. Anyway, that rallied the team. Anyway, so neither of these regimes picked him. But let's be fair, it was Adam Gase's regime that helped to develop him to this point, right? And so Parker's biggest issue again has not been his talent. It hasn't even been that he flashed, that he didn't flash or show the signs when he was on the field. It was because he was hurt. It was hurt, and it was because he didn't have the right diet and sleep routine and work ethic and so on and so forth. It was the Adam Gase regime that got him there. Okay, but this coaching staff definitely deserves credit for how they've worked with him this year and helped him to elevate, get him to live up to his potential after having, been able to, make those necessary changes with the previous regime, right? So this coaching staff does get some credit, but Adam Gase and his regime definitely get the credit for, getting him to that point as a professional where he could have a breakout season. So I definitely would say it's a little bit more on the Adam Gase regime. Also, let's note though, Chris Greer does get some credit for picking Devontae Parker because he was part of, the scouting department and so on and so forth that got him. All right, so injuries. Kalen Ballage got injured with a leg injury. He might be out for the rest of the season. Jerome Baker had a chest injury in this game. Obviously, like I said, he popped up on the injury report this week. And he did exit the game, so we'll have to watch there. So a little bit of a trend down. The Kalen Ballage injury could actually be a net benefit because he's so terrible. But if he does go on injured reserve, then that would, I'm pretty sure, guarantee that, he ends up as officially as one of the worst running backs to ever exist in the league in a single season. So that kind of sucks. but it is what it is at this point. So bright spots, again, Devontae Parker finally had a truly dominant game, but he does need to show this on a more consistent basis. So going forward, he definitely needs to prove that he's going to stay healthy and that he's going to be able to do this. Now, he does have career highs in yardage and touchdowns, and he's close to a career high in receptions. So he had a career high in receptions in 2017 with 57 in Adam Gase's time with the team, and he had a career high in yardage in 2016, our playoff year, with Adam Gase, with 744. And the most touchdowns he had also came in 2016 with Adam Gase, which was 4. So, you know, but if you look at it, in 2015, he had 26 receptions, 494 yards, a 19 average, 3 touchdowns. Okay, so he had a decent and okay kind of middle of the ground rookie season, right? You know, maybe you'd say like a third, you know, a number 3, maybe a number 2 receiver, but he obviously was injured a lot. And year 2, but his first year with Adam Gase, and the year that we went to the playoffs, he had 56 receptions, 744 yards, 13.3 average, and 4 touchdowns. So that was his best year, obviously at that point, but also up until this year, in most categories. 57 receptions, 670 yards, 11.8 average, and 1 touchdown. 2018, 24 receptions, 309 yards, 12.9 average, and a touchdown. Right? So in his first 4 seasons, he really only was like, you know, number 2, number 3-ish receiver, right? He hadn't quite lived up to his potential, mostly because he was injured, right? But that regime got him to the point where, I mean, up until this year, the only like true number 2 receiver season that he had was in 2016 under Adam Gase. And they are the regime that got him to the point where his work ethic and so on and so forth, his professionalism, has now allowed him to have a breakout season. So credit where it's due. Okay. So I just want to make sure that that is clear. Also, by the way, I do think I like the structure of this a little bit better, but there's so much to talk about that this video is ending up quite long anyway. And I'm trying to work on, you know, being a little bit more fluid with, you know, how I say things and so on and so forth. So I'm working on that. That's part of the reason why I'm structuring things a little bit differently. So I am trying to work on that. But this is going to end up probably being about an hour because I got a little bit more. So let's see. Mike Gesicki was a bright spot. Showed why Gase drafted him, but again, he was a Gase pick, and it was necessary for him to learn how to be a better blocker, which is the credit goes to, again, the Gase regime for picking him, 1, and 2, for getting him better as a blocker so that way he could be more effective overall as a tight end, and then also earn more, you know, reps in the passing game. Because again, you know, with him, up to this point, it's never been his ability, and this is exactly, you know, the things that he showed in this game and has showed recently was exactly why the Gase regime drafted him, which, of course, Chris Greer was part of that regime and is part of this regime as well. But the Gase drafts were the drafts in the Gase regime were really good overall. He high pointed a ball for a touchdown. He tried to hurdle a guy at one point and kind of like kneed him in the chest or like kneed him in the shoulder. I do think he needs to be careful with that. He is known for trying to do that. I thought it was funny and it was fun. It was exciting, but he does need to be careful about that. Patrick Laird, definitely a bright spot, showed his versatility in the run and pass game, showed shiftiness and run after the catch ability, got his first NFL rushing touchdown behind Chandler Cox, also caught the following 2-point conversion. Ryan Fitzpatrick was a bright spot, proved again to be a tough and exciting leader, always chewing gum, which I find to be funny as well, and he can be very fun to watch. Sam McGuavin, also was a bright spot, and he made some noise in this game after being, quiet up to this point since the preseason. He showed good things in the preseason, but then has been, exceptionally quiet up till now. Taco Charlton, he added another sack to his totals and a forced fumble, but to be fair, Sam McGuavin actually probably should have had. He was the one that, really got the pressure and should have gotten the sack. The only reason why he didn't was because before Sam McGuavin had got him, Carson Wentz, down on the ground, Taco Charlton came in and, just knocked the ball out of Wentz's hands. So that's automatically a strip sack, which then gets, tacked on to Taco Charlton. So it's kind of a mixed bag there, right? Because like I said, for him, he's kind of up and down. Yes, now he has 5 sacks on the season and he leads the team, but 2 of them for sure were cleanup sacks, and that one probably shouldn't have been credited to him, but with the way that the rules are written and so on and so forth, it kind of de facto got credited to him. But he is a bright spot overall on this team, and is one of the very few examples of, former first round picks that are actually, he's the best looking one so far, because, Christian Wilkins is kind of having just a, whatever season. It is his rookie year, to be fair. Although Devontae Parker, I guess Devontae Parker now is probably the one that's having the best season out of former first round picks. But Taco Charlton is number 2 then. Robert Kondichi got cut. Who else do we have? Josh Rosen doesn't seem like it's going to go anywhere with this team. That's still up in the air, but that doesn't, look like it's going to be much of anything. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, so also Nick Needham, he's a bright spot. Why? Because he continues to show consistency in the back end of the defense. Albert Wilson, he did some good things in the pass game and run game, had a solid day overall. Look, there definitely were a ton of bright spots in this game, and there are certainly, a handful of bright spots and potential carryovers for next year. There was some news today that Eric Rowe got a contract extension, 3 years that'll hold him down through the 2022 season. It's a 3-year, $18 million deal with $7 million guaranteed. And obviously they just recently signed Allen Hurns. Look, I don't hate those signings, but at the end of the day, those guys are kind of just average at best players, right? And so we definitely need a whole bunch of average. I would take a whole bunch of average on this team, but there is going to be a ton of roster turnover next year. And, it is going to be super young and inexperienced again. And, the only superstar for sure we have right now is Xavier Howard. The only, real major cornerstone that we have is Xavier Howard. Devontae Parker is certainly pushing himself in that direction, but everybody else is average at best as of right now. Some of the guys like Preston Williams could certainly develop into something, and I certainly think that guys like Preston Williams and Jakeem Grant and Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki and Patrick Laird could certainly spell for an exciting offense, but they have to address the offensive line, and they need to hold that in higher regard than quarterback, in my opinion. And so we'll see how they go. I mean, they could certainly, and again, for as much criticism as I've given them, they could certainly prove me wrong, but they have a lot of holes to fill. They have a long way to go, and they got to do it smart, and they got to do it right. And at this point, right now, the evidence does not, work in their favor. But again, they definitely can prove me wrong. So we'll just have to see how it goes, forward and see what they do. We'll have to wait and see how the rest of the season plays out. Every game is going to, from here on out, the last few are going to be the same. Are we able to win? Competitiveness, injuries, so on and so forth, right? So, and then we'll see at the end of the year what our, draft positioning is. Then we can start really having a conversation about what we think they're going to do. Because at least then we'll know where we're picking. and then we can speculate about how they're going to pick, and then we have to wait and see what they actually do, right? I don't agree with them, with the philosophy of being big spenders in free agency. They have said they were going to do that, and it seems pretty for certain to me that they are going to, go out of their way to get a quarterback in the first round, even if that potentially means trading up to get one, which I think would be devastating, and a terrible way to go about it. But again, not written in stone, so we have to wait and see. So to end this, I do want to talk about some of the other games. And so, unfortunately, I have a way of just talking. I'm quite good at it, as I'm sure you guys have noticed. So this video is going to be a little bit over an hour, but this is how I'll wrap it. I do want to talk about some of the other games and the implications of those games on the, current order of picks. So as it stands right now, we have the number 4th overall pick, we have the number 22nd overall pick, and the number 25th overall pick. By the way, if you guys want to see, the race for the number 1 pick, if you go to tankathon.com/NFL, I'll actually put the link in the bottom of this video. Then you can see where everybody currently stacks up. So, right now, like I said, the 4th, the 22nd, and the 25th, right? And so there are a bunch of teams right now. The top 10 is looking at the Cincinnati Bengals number 1, the New York Giants number 2, the Washington Redskins number 3, then us at 4, then the Falcons, then the Lions, then the Cardinals, then the Jaguars, then the Jets, and the Chargers to round out the top 10. Okay, but so let's look at some of these games and how it got there, right? So how did we end up after this week with the 4th, the 22nd, and the 25th, and how did the top 10 end up the way that it did? Well, let's see. The Bears beat the Lions, the Bills beat the Cowboys, Saints beat the Falcons, right? So, the Falcons and the Lions, added to their loss, so that puts them at 5 and 6 respectively. Let's also note that Matt Patricia is having a hard time as the head coach of the Detroit Lions in his first few years. So, historically speaking, the proteges of Bill Belichick have not done very well, but we'll see how that turns out. Just a side note, the Redskins did beat the Panthers 29-21. But even with their win, they still do stay 1 pick ahead of us. The Jets lost to the Bengals pretty bad, 22-6. That's how they got their win. They are still pretty firm as the number 1 overall pick and are pretty much guaranteed at this point. Close. I mean, obviously, it's not a for sure thing, but it is, about as close as it can get. But the thing about the Jets loss, right, that puts them at 4-8. The Jets are now at 4-8, and since we just won and we are now at 3-9, we play the Jets next week. Okay, now that game is in New York, so it's a home field for them, but we have one on the road, and the Jets had certainly a 3-game stretch there that was really impressive. They had a little bit of a turnaround that got them to their 4 wins, but this last game, I haven't watched it, but it obviously wasn't very good. I mean, they only mustered 6 points. They lost to the Bengals, so obviously they still are having their struggles, and we did beat them already, so it is possible that we win. And so if we win next week, which I personally want because I just want wins, but if we win, that means that we will go to 4-9, and then the Jets will go to 4-9. But since we will have beat them twice, they could jump us in the lineup, right? So that could potentially drop us out of the top 5. Also, too, as it stands, I mean, the Falcons right now are 3-9. The Lions are 3-8-1. The Cardinals are 3-8-1. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 4-8. The Jets are 4-8, and the Chargers are 4-8, and the Broncos are 4-8. That's the top 11. Okay, so even 1-2 more wins could drop us not only out of the top 5, but potentially out of the top 10. So, and especially too, if we beat the Jets, who are currently at 9, if we beat the Giants, who are currently at 2, who's the team we play after the Jets. If we beat the Cincinnati Bengals, who's currently at 1, and if that's 3 more wins, that would put us at 6 wins. That could drop us out of the top 10, right? And then, you know, if the Houston Texans just beat the Patriots, that put them to 8-4 now, which was huge, right? But the Colts, I mean, the Titans behind Ryan Tannehill, which obviously I want to mention because Ryan Tannehill once again had a good performance and helped lead that team to yet another win. But that's the one team in the division that could push the Houston Texans. They are now 1 game behind the Texans. And the Tennessee Titans actually could even potentially still make it into the playoffs, even if it was in the wild card. But you know, if Houston's going to fall out of the playoffs, then Tennessee's the only shot that they have. Or is the only team I think that's really going to give them, you know, that chance. But the season's coming to a close, and the Titans do have some tough games down the stretch. But we'll see. You know what I'm saying? We'll see what ends up happening. But as it stands right now, I mean, the Steelers just got a win over the Browns. So they are now 7-5, and they are at the 22 seed, right? So there is high potential that we could end up dropping out of not just the top 5, but the top 10 with our personal pick. And then it's definitely possible that the Pittsburgh and the Houston picks are in the 20s, right? If both of those teams make it to the playoffs, then they're both guaranteed to be in the 20s, those picks, okay? Because the lowest pick that any playoff team can have is 21. So if we end up having 2 picks that are in the 20s, and then our personal pick drops out of the top 10, then what happens with this upcoming draft? And again, we know that, you know, we know that Stephen Ross is desperately craving for a quarterback. And again, he dissented with the Minkah Fitzpatrick pick, right? Even though that pick is proven to be brilliant. He had a great rookie season. And even though despite the fact that he did have to play out of position a little bit at, you know, boundary corner out of necessity, but now he's balling out for the Steelers and is potentially in the mix for Defensive Player of the Year, right? Especially if they make it to the playoffs. Oh my God, right? So, and especially then if they win in the playoffs, if they win a game in the playoffs, oh my God, right? So, Stephen Ross wants that pick. I mean, he wants a quarterback. So there is definitely a lot of potential that they could move up to get one. And that would be a disaster. The worst thing they could do would be to move up to pick Tua. Because I think that that's way too much of a risk picking him just in general. But especially picking him if, you know, with that most recent injury and his injury history. So anyway, you know, we'll have to see how all this works out. Again, a lot of this is still not set in stone, and we have to wait and see how it plays out over the next few weeks. Figure out what the firm set draft positioning is going to be. I mean, we may even have to wait, you know, into the playoffs, right, to see how far the Texans and the Steelers are able to go if they make it in the playoffs. So, yeah. Anyway, it was a great game. We got another win, so I'm personally super happy about that. It was super exciting. There was a lot of wonderful things, and this was, you know, the first game where there was far more good than there was bad. So, look, I mean, even if the coaching staff did go out the rest of the season and, like, you know, blatantly, obviously, like, throw games, which I don't think is going to be that perverse and obvious, but even if they did, you can't take this one away, because this one was awesome, and I'm going to revel in it at least until, you know, this next week, depending on how this next game goes. If we lose, then it'll suck again. Yeah, but, you know, this upcoming draft is going to be a huge mystery. So, you know, but before we really start to speculate, let's see how it all plays out. All right, guys, that's going to be how I wrap it. So, yeah. It ended up being a little bit over an hour. It is what it is. I'll try my best. I am working to try and trim it to the best of my ability, but there's a lot to talk about, and I like to, you know, like I said, I like to make sure I give you full context. So I like to give you all of the stats, you know, the full breakdown, and all that stuff. I think it's all super important, so that way you guys have all of the information that you need to make the most educated decisions for yourselves, you know, and hopefully my analysis helps that as well. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and get up out of here. I hope you guys enjoy my videos and my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts, make sure you share my channel with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section, and of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.